Some say miracles don't happen anymore, that the American dream is dead, that no one looks out for strangers these days. But on a cold Chicago night, at a small gas station on the corner of two busy streets, Michael Jordan was about to prove them wrong. What happened next would change not just one family's life, but remind the world that sometimes angels wear expensive suits and drive luxury SUVs. Sometimes they appear at 1 a.m. when you least expect them, and sometimes they see the strength in you that you've forgotten was there. This is the story of Sarah Thompson, 8 months pregnant and working the night shift at Jerry's gas station, and the basketball legend who saw his own mother's spirit. In her tired smile, Sarah Thompson's feet were killing her. 8 months pregnant and working the night shift at Jerry's gas station wasn't exactly what she'd planned for herself, but life had a funny way of changing your plans. She shifted her weight from one swollen ankle to the other, trying to find a position that hurt less while she restocked the candy bars near the front counter. The clock on the wall read 11:30 p.m., only 3.5 more hours until her shift ended. She could do this. She had to do this. "Just a little longer, baby," she whispered, rubbing her round belly. The baby kicked in response, making her smile despite her exhaustion. I know. Mama's tired too." The small gas station sat on the corner of two busy Chicago streets. But at this time of night, the traffic had slowed to almost nothing. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the aisles of snacks, drinks, and car supplies. Outside, the winter wind howled, rattling the windows and making Sarah grateful for the warmth inside, even if it meant being stuck here until 3 a.m. She glanced at her reflection in the window. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed how tired she really was, but she made sure to keep a smile on her face. That's what her mama had always taught her. Keep smiling, baby girl. No matter what life throws at you, keep smiling. Right now, life had thrown quite a lot their way. Her husband, Marcus, had lost his job at the factory 3 months ago when they shut down the whole plant. 300 workers, just like that, all without jobs. The timing couldn't have been worse, right when they were expecting their first baby. Sarah pulled out her phone and looked at the photo she kept as her background. Marcus in his work uniform, grinning proudly in front of the factory where he'd worked for 6 years. He was out right now, probably at his 3rd job interview this week. She believed in him with all her heart, but the rejections were starting to wear him down. She could see it in his eyes every time he came home, trying to hide his disappointment. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Sarah from her thoughts. A teenager walked in, his hands shoved deep in his pockets to escape the cold. "Welcome to Jerry's," Sarah called out cheerfully, as if it wasn't almost midnight, as if her back wasn't aching, as if she wasn't worried sick about their future. The boy nodded and shuffled toward the drink coolers. Sarah watched him through the security mirror mounted in the corner, not because she thought he would steal. She hated having to suspect people, but because her manager Jerry had trained her to always keep an eye on late-night customers. Jerry was a good man. When Sarah had told him about Marcus losing his job, Jerry had immediately offered her extra shifts. "You're my best worker, Sarah," he'd said. "Always on time, always smiling. We take care of our own here." The extra hours helped, but they were still barely making ends meet. The medical bills were piling up, even with insurance. Who knew having a baby could be so expensive? And that was just the prenatal care. She tried not to think about the actual hospital bills that would come with the delivery. The teenager brought his energy drink to the counter. Sarah rang him up, noticing how he counted out exact change from what looked like tip money. Probably a delivery driver trying to stay awake for his shift, just like her. "Stay warm out there," she said as he headed for the door. He turned back and gave her a real smile this time, his first of the night. "You too, ma'am. And congratulations," he added, gesturing to her belly. "Thank you," Sarah beamed. These small moments of kindness from strangers helped make the long nights bearable. After he left, Sarah checked her task list for the night. Jerry liked everything done just so, and she prided herself on doing every job perfectly. Restock the coolers? Check. Clean the coffee station? Check. Mop the floors? She looked down at her swollen ankles and sighed. That one would have to wait a bit. Instead, she pulled out the stack of job applications Marcus had asked her to pick up from different stores on her way to work. She'd gotten 5 of them, and now she carefully filled them out with Marcus's information, making sure her handwriting was neat and clear. His hands shook too much these days when he tried to write. Stress, he said, though Sarah worried it was something more, like depression setting in. "Your daddy's a good man," she told her belly as she wrote. "The best man I know. He just needs a chance to prove it to someone else." The baby kicked again, stronger this time. Sarah had to pause her writing and breathe through it. Dr. Mitchell had said the baby was bigger than average at her last checkup, which explained why every kick felt like a tiny boxer was practicing inside her. "You're going to be strong like your daddy," she said, rubbing the spot where she'd felt the kick. "And stubborn like your mama." A gust of wind made the windows rattle extra hard, and Sarah pulled her thin sweater tighter around herself. The heating in the gas station wasn't the best, and she couldn't zip up her winter coat anymore over her belly. But she wasn't about to complain. At least she had a job, which was more than many people could say these days. She thought about the birthday card she'd gotten in the mail yesterday from her mother down in Mississippi. Inside had been a check for $100 with a note saying, "For the baby." Sarah knew her mother must have scraped and saved for weeks to send that much. She'd cried when she saw it, but she was determined to save it for something special for the baby, not just regular bills. The rest of the hour passed slowly. Sarah reorganized the cigarette display behind the counter, carefully checking expiration dates on the boxes of cheap cigars. She wiped down the counter for the 3rd time that night, then decided to tackle the coffee station again, even though it was already clean. Keeping busy helped keep her mind off her aching feet and back. Just before 1 a.m., her phone buzzed. AE, text from Marcus. "No luck at Thompson Manufacturing, but I have 2 more interviews lined up for tomorrow. Love you both." Sarah's heart squeezed. She could read the discouragement between the lines, but she loved how he always tried to end on a hopeful note. She quickly texted back, "We love you too. Got some applications filled out for you. You're going to find something soon, I know. It." She added a heart emoji, then slipped the phone back in her pocket as another customer pulled up to the gas pump outside. The night was only half over, but Sarah straightened her shoulders and fixed her smile firmly in place. Her mama was right. Keep smiling no matter what. After all, you never knew when things might change for the better. Through the windows, she watched the expensive-looking black SUV pull up to the pump, its tinted windows reflecting the fluorescent lights of the gas station. Something about it caught her attention, but she couldn't say what. Just another customer, she told herself, though her heart beat a little faster for some reason she couldn't explain. Little did Sarah know, this particular customer was about to change everything. Sarah watched as the black SUV came to a stop at pump number 3. The vehicle was so clean, it seemed to shine even in the dim light of the gas station, and she could tell it was expensive. One of those luxury brands she only saw in commercials or driving through the rich neighborhoods across town. The winter wind whipped across the empty parking lot, sending a few stray pieces of paper tumbling past the pumps. Sarah pulled her sweater tighter and waited to see if the driver would need help. Some of their fancier customers didn't like dealing with the self-service pumps, especially on cold nights like this. When the driver's door opened, a tall man stepped out. Even from inside the store, Sarah could tell he was unusually tall. Basketball player tall, she thought to herself. He wore what looked like an expensive suit under a long winter coat, and something about the way he carried himself made her stand up a little straighter behind the counter. The man took off his leather gloves and reached for the pump, and Sarah relaxed a little. At least he knew how to pump his own gas. Some of their late-night customers could be demanding, and her feet were already killing her. But instead of starting to pump the gas, the man just stood there, looking through the store window. Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Was something wrong? Should she go out and help? The baby chose that moment to give a strong kick, as if sensing her unease. "It's okay," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "Just another customer." But he wasn't acting like just another customer. He had pulled out a phone and was talking to someone while continuing to glance at the store window. Sarah couldn't see his eyes clearly in the darkness, but she could feel him watching her. She busied herself with straightening the items on the counter, trying to look casual while keeping an eye on him through the security mirror. The man's voice carried faintly through the window as he talked on his phone. She couldn't make out the words, but his tone sounded serious. He gestured with one hand while he talked, and something about the motion seemed familiar to Sarah, though she couldn't place why. Minutes passed, and he still hadn't started pumping gas. Sarah's nervousness began to grow. Should she call Jerry? Her manager had told her to trust her instincts about suspicious customers, and something definitely felt off about this situation. But what would she even say? There's a well-dressed man in an expensive car acting strange. It sounded silly even in her head. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Sarah had to grip the counter to steady herself. "Settle down in there," she whispered. "Mama's just being paranoid." Finally, the man ended his call and put his phone away. He reached for the pump, and Sarah felt some of her tension ease. See? Just a regular customer who needed to make a phone call. Nothing to worry about, but then he stopped again, his hand on the pump, and turned to look directly at her through the window. This time, the light from the store fell across his face clearly, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She knew that face. Everyone in Chicago knew that face. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, her hand going to her mouth. "That's..." But before she could finish the thought, the bell above the door chimed. Another customer walked in, this one a middle-aged woman in scrubs, probably just getting off a hospital shift. Sarah quickly put on her professional smile and turned to help her, though she couldn't help stealing glances at the window. "Just these and 20 on pump 1, the nurse said, placing a coffee and a pack of gum on the counter. Sarah rang her up on autopilot, her mind racing. Was she imagining things? Maybe she was more tired than she thought. After all, why would Michael Jordan be at Jerry's gas station at 1 in the morning? The nurse left, and Sarah found herself alone again, watching the tall man through the window. He had finally started pumping gas, his movements relaxed and unhurried despite the cold. Up close now, there was no doubt in her mind. It was really him. The Michael Jordan, 6 NBA championships with the Bulls, the greatest basketball player of all time. Right here at her gas station. Sarah's hand went to her hair, suddenly wishing she didn't look such a mess. Her work shirt was wrinkled from a long shift, and she knew her face showed how tired she was. Not that it mattered. He was just here to get gas, like any other customer. He probably wouldn't even look at her twice. The pump clicked off, and Sarah's heart started beating faster. He would have to come inside to pay. Should she act like she recognized him? Or would that be unprofessional? Jerry always said to treat every customer the same, no matter who they were. Before she could decide, her back seized up with one of the sharp pains that had been bothering her lately. Sarah tried to hide her grimace as she shifted position. One hand going to support her lower back. 8 months pregnant and on her feet all night was taking its toll, but she couldn't afford to take it easy. Not with their bills piling up and Marcus still looking for work. Through the window, she saw Jordan pause as he replaced the pump. He was looking at her again, but this time his expression was different. Thoughtful, almost concerned. Sarah quickly straightened up and busied herself with the register, embarrassed to be caught showing weakness. The bell chimed again, and Sarah took a deep breath, preparing to act normal. Just treat him like any other customer, she told herself. But when she looked up, it wasn't Jordan who had entered. It was a group of 3 teenage boys, laughing and shoving each other as they headed for the snack aisle. Sarah kept one eye on the teenagers. Groups of young people late at night always made her a little nervous. And one eye on the window, where Jordan was still standing by his SUV. He had his phone out again and was typing something, his tall frame partially hidden in the shadows between the lights. The teenagers brought their snacks to the counter, still horsing around and talking, loudly. As Sarah rang them up, she noticed one of them trying to secretly slip a candy bar into his pocket. Her heart sank. She hated this part of the job. "Sir," she said firmly, looking the boy in the eye, "please put the Snickers bar on the counter." The boy's friends instantly went quiet. He started to protest, but Sarah just held his gaze steadily. After a moment, his shoulders slumped, and he pulled the candy bar from his pocket, placing it on the counter with the other items. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, ringing it up with the rest. She could have called the police, or at least threatened to, but she remembered being young and stupid once too. Sometimes people just needed a chance to do the right thing. The boys paid and left quickly, embarrassed now. As the door closed behind them, Sarah heard one friend scolding the would-be thief. "Man, you tried to steal from a pregnant lady? That's cold." Sarah smiled to herself, then looked back toward the window. Jordan was gone. Her heart dropped in disappointment. Had he left? But no, there was his SUV, still sitting at pump 3. So, where? The bell chimed one more time, and Sarah's breath caught as Michael Jordan himself walked through the door. He was even taller in person, his presence seeming to fill the small store. Their eyes met, and to Sarah's surprise, he gave her a warm smile. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, his voice deep and pleasant. Or, I guess it's good morning by now. Sarah found her professional voice. "Good morning, sir. Will that be all for pump 3? He nodded, still studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "And I'd like to compliment you on how you handled those young men just now. That was impressive." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Oh, thank you, sir. They're good kids, really. Sometimes people just need a gentle reminder to do what's right." Jordan smiled again, and this time Sarah saw something else in his expression. Recognition, maybe? As if her words had reminded him of someone. He pulled out his wallet, and Sarah caught a glimpse of what looked like a photo tucked inside before he took out his credit card. As she ran his card, Sarah felt his eyes on her again. She tried to stand straight despite her aching back, determined to be professional. But when she handed him the receipt to sign, he surprised her by asking, "How far along are you?" 8 months, Sarah answered. one hand automatically going to her belly. Just a few more weeks to go. Jordan nodded, then glanced around the empty store. "And you're working the night shift? That can't be easy." There was genuine concern in his voice, and for a moment, Sarah felt tears threatening. She was so tired of being strong all the time, of pretending everything was fine. But she just smiled and said, "You do what you have to do, right?" Something flickered in Jordan's eyes at her words. He pulled out his phone again, then seemed to hesitate. "Would you mind if I made a quick call? It's important." "Of course not, sir. Take your time." He stepped away from the counter but didn't leave the store. Sarah tried not to eavesdrop, but she couldn't help noticing how intensely he was speaking to whoever was on the other end. She caught phrases like background check and employment history, which seemed strange. The baby kicked again, and Sarah rubbed her belly absently, wondering what someone like Michael Jordan could want to know about her. But that was silly. He was probably talking about something completely unrelated to her. Just because he'd been watching her didn't mean anything, right? Finally, Jordan ended his call and walked back to the counter. His expression had changed. There was a determination there now that reminded Sarah of how he used to look before taking a game-winning shot. "Thank you for your patience," he said, pocketing his phone. "And thank you for your honesty tonight." Sarah blinked, confused. "My honesty?" He just smiled. "Have a good night, Mrs. Thompson, and take care of yourself, both of you." Before Sarah could process the fact that he somehow knew her name, he was gone, the bell chiming one last time as the door closed behind him. She watched through the window as he got into his SUV and drove away, her mind spinning with questions. How had he known her name? Why had he been watching her? What was that mysterious phone call about? And why did she have a feeling that this strange encounter wasn't over? Sarah rubbed her tired eyes, wondering if she had imagined the whole thing. But no, there was his signature on the credit card receipt, clear as day. Michael Jordan had really been in her gas station. Little did she know, he wasn't done surprising her yet. In fact, the biggest surprise of all was still to come. Michael Jordan drove slowly through the empty Chicago streets, his mind still on the pregnant woman working the late shift at Jerry's gas station. Her image stayed with him, the tired smile, the way she rubbed her back when she thought no one was watching, the gentle but firm way she had handled those teenagers. But most of all, he couldn't shake how much she reminded him of his own mother. He pulled over into an empty parking lot and took out his wallet. Behind his credit cards was a worn photograph he always carried with him. His mother, Dolores Jordan, standing proud in her work uniform. She had worked multiple jobs while raising him and his siblings, never complaining, always pushing forward, with that same quiet determination he had just seen in Sarah Thompson's eyes. "You were right, Mama," he whispered to the photo. "You always said to keep my eyes open for angels in disguise." The phone call he had made earlier was to his personal assistant, Robert. "I need everything you can find on Sarah Thompson at Jerry's gas station," he had said. "And I mean everything. How long she's worked there, her situation, her husband, all of it. Wake up, whoever you need to wake up." Now his phone buzzed with Robert's findings. Jordan read through the information, his jaw tightening. The story was all too familiar. Hard-working family hit by bad luck, struggling to stay afloat. Sarah's husband, Marcus, had an excellent work record at the factory until it closed down. They had no criminal history, paid their bills on time until recently, and were active in their community despite their struggles. "Just like Mama and Daddy," Jordan murmured. His father had always said, that a person's true character showed not in how they handled success, but in how they handled hardship. From what he could see, the Thompsons were handling their hardships with grace. He scrolled through more information. Sarah had been working at the gas station for 3 years, always on time, never missing a shift. She had picked up extra hours. When her husband lost his job, even though her doctor had advised her to reduce her work schedule during the pregnancy, her manager's notes described her as the most reliable employee I've ever had. The baby was due in 6 weeks. They had medical insurance through Sarah's job, but it was basic coverage with high deductibles. The cost of the delivery alone would put them deep in debt. Jordan closed his eyes, remembering how his own mother had worked right up until the day she gave birth to his youngest sister. He had been 12 then, old enough to understand the worry in his father's eyes every time his mother came home exhausted from another long shift. "Not this time," he said firmly. "Not if I can help it." He made another call, this time to his lawyer. "Remember that gas station chain we were looking at buying? Jerry's? I want to fast-track the purchase, and I want to make some changes to the deal." His lawyer protested about the late hour, but Jordan cut him off. "This can't wait until morning. I need you to add something to the contract. The current manager of store number 23, Sarah Thompson, I want her promoted to regional manager once she's back from maternity leave. Full benefits, competitive salary, the works." He paused, then added, "And I want to set up a college fund for her unborn child. Make it enough to cover any school they choose." "But Mr. Jordan," his lawyer started, "we don't even know if the chain is willing to sell." "Make them willing," Jordan interrupted. "Whatever it takes. And one more thing. I want everything ready to announce by tomorrow morning. Can you do that?" There was a long pause, then, "Yes, sir. I'll make it happen." "Good." Jordan ended the call and sat back in his seat, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city had given him so much: fame, fortune, a platform to make a difference. But he had never forgotten where he came from, or the people who had helped him along the way. His mother had always told him, "Michael, when you're blessed, it's not just for you. It's so you can be a blessing to others." He had tried to live by those words, but sometimes it was easy to get caught up in the business side of things, to forget to look for those small moments where he could make a real difference. Thank goodness he had needed gas tonight. Thank goodness he had chosen that particular station. Thank goodness he had taken the time to really see the person behind the counter. Jordan picked up his phone one last time. "Robert, I need one more thing. Find out where Marcus Thompson has been applying for jobs. I want to make some calls in the morning." He smiled, imagining Sarah's face when she found out what was coming. But it wasn't just about helping one family. It was about honoring his mother's legacy, about remembering his own roots, about doing what he could with the blessings he had been given. The clock on his dashboard read 2:15 a.m. Sarah would be working for another 45 minutes, not knowing that her life was about to change. Jordan thought about going back to tell her himself, but decided against it. Some news was better delivered in the light of day. Instead, he started his car and headed home, his mother's photo safely back in his wallet. As he drove, he remembered something else she used to say. "Sometimes God puts you in the right place at the right time. The question is, will you notice? And if you notice, will you act?" Tonight, he had noticed. And tomorrow, he would act. But as Michael Jordan drove through the sleeping city, even he didn't know just how far-reaching the effects of his actions would be. Sometimes a single act of kindness could start a chain reaction that no one could predict. Not even a 6-time NBA champion who was used to changing the game. The night was almost over, but for Sarah Thompson and her family, a new day was about to dawn. And it would be unlike any day they had ever known. The rest of Sarah's shift seemed to pass in a blur. She kept replaying her strange encounter with Michael Jordan in her mind, trying to make sense of it. Why had he seemed so interested in her? And how had he known her name? At 2:45 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Just got home from dropping off applications. How are you feeling? Baby letting you rest any?" Sarah smiled as she typed back, "You won't believe who just came to the gas station. The Michael Jordan." 3 dots appeared immediately as Marcus typed his response. "For real? Did you get his autograph?" "No," Sarah wrote back. "I was trying to be professional. But Marcus, he was acting kind of strange, watching me and making phone calls." Strange how? Should I be worried? Sarah thought about it. No, not scary strange. Just different. Like he was really seeing me, you know? Not just looking through me like most customers do. That's wild. Wait till I tell. "Mama, she's gonna flip! Her favorite player!" Sarah grinned, imagining her mother-in-law's reaction. The woman had every Bulls championship game recorded on old VHS tapes, carefully labeled and stored in her basement. She would probably faint when she heard the news. The bell above the door chimed, startling Sarah from her thoughts. A police officer walked in. Officer Chen, one of their regulars who always stopped by near the end of her shift to check on her. "Morning, Sarah," Officer Chen said warmly. "How's our night shift, Mama? Doing?" "I'm good, just tired," Sarah answered, already getting his usual coffee ready. Large, 2 sugars, extra cream. Not too much longer now, right? Officer Chen nodded at her belly. "Both with the baby and the shift?" 6 more weeks till the ET-AT baby, God willing, and... Sarah checked the clock. About 10 minutes left of this shift. Officer Chen took his coffee and leaned against the counter. "You know, my wife worked right up until our first was born, too. Crazy how expensive having a baby is, right? Even with insurance." Sarah nodded, thinking about the stack of medical bills in their kitchen drawer. "Tell me about it. But we'll manage somehow. We always do." "That's the spirit." Officer Chen straightened up and pulled out his wallet. "Oh, by the way, was that Michael Jordan's car I saw pulling out of here earlier? Black SUV? You saw him too?" Sarah felt relieved. At least now she knew she hadn't imagined it. "Yeah, he was here about an hour ago." "Huh." Officer Chen looked thoughtful. "You know, I heard he's been buying up businesses around Chicago lately. Real estate investments or something." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "You think he might be interested in buying Jerry's?" "Could be. Though usually when rich folks buy places like this, they tear them down and build something fancier." Sarah's stomach tightened with worry. She couldn't afford to lose this job. Not now. Not with the baby coming and Marcus still looking for work. Jerry was a good boss who understood when she needed time off for doctor's appointments. A new owner might not be so understanding. Officer Chen must have seen the worry on her face because he quickly added, "But hey, that's just gossip. I'm sure everything will be fine." Sarah managed a smile and rang up his coffee. After he left, she sat down on the stool behind the counter, suddenly feeling very tired. The baby was extra active tonight, doing what felt like somersaults in her belly. "Settle down in there," she whispered. "Mama's got enough to worry about without you starting a dance party." Her phone buzzed again, another text from Marcus. "Got an email about a job interview tomorrow. That manufacturing company on Roosevelt Street wants to meet with me at 9 a.m. Sarah's heart lifted. That's wonderful. See, I told you something would come through. Want me to iron your blue shirt when I get home? Already did it. You need to rest when you get home. I mean it, Sarah. No doing extra chores. She smiled at his concern. Marcus was always trying to take care of her, even when he was struggling himself. That's one of the reasons she had fallen in love with him, his big heart. The clock finally showed 3 a.m. Sarah started her closing routine, trying to move a little faster than usual. She wanted to get home in time to help Marcus prepare for his interview, no matter what he said about resting. As she counted the register, her mind wandered back to Jordan's visit. There had been something in his eyes when she talked about doing what you had to do, like he understood exactly what she meant. Maybe he was remembering his own family's struggles before he became famous? Sarah had read about his background once in a magazine at the doctor's office. How his mother had worked multiple jobs to support the family. How he hadn't even made his high school basketball team at first, but kept practicing until he became the best player they'd ever seen. You hear that, little one? She patted her belly. Nothing wrong with humble beginnings. Look at Mr. Jordan. He worked his way up from nothing to become the greatest basketball player ever. And your daddy and I are going to make sure you have every chance to follow your dreams too, whatever they turn out to be. The baby kicked, as if in agreement, and Sarah smiled. Maybe that's all Jordan's visit had been. A successful man remembering where he came from, showing a little kindness to someone who reminded him of his own mother. Still, as she gathered her things and prepared to lock up, she couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Call it mother's intuition or just wishful thinking, but the air felt different somehow, like the quiet before a storm. Jerry would be coming in soon to take over the morning shift. Sarah left him a note about restocking the coffee supplies and grabbed her coat. Outside, the winter wind had died down, and she could see the first hint of dawn lightening the eastern sky. A new day was beginning, and somehow Sarah knew deep in her heart that this day would be different from any other. She just didn't know how different. Not yet. Sarah managed to get 4 hours of sleep before her phone started ringing. She reached for it groggily, expecting to see Marcus's name on the screen. Instead, it was Jerry. Sarah? Sorry to wake you, but, you need to come to the store. Right now. Sarah sat up, instantly alert. Jerry never called her on her day off. Is something wrong? Did something happen during inventory? No, nothing's wrong exactly. Just, there are some people here who need to talk to you. Important people. And, well, there are news vans in the parking lot. News vans? Sarah's heart started racing. Jerry, what's going on? I honestly don't know, but you better get down here quick. And Sarah? Maybe wear something nice. Sarah looked down at her worn maternity pajamas and felt a wave of panic. Give me 30 minutes, she said, already struggling to get out of bed. Marcus was at his job interview, so she called her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez to drive her to the store. As they turned onto the main road, Sarah could see the news vans from 2 blocks away. At least 3 of them, their satellite dishes raised high against the morning sky. Dios mío, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered as they got closer. What's happening at your store, mijija? Sarah just shook her head, her mouth dry. She had put on her nicest maternity dress, the dark blue one she saved for doctor's appointments. But she still felt underdressed for whatever was waiting for her. A small crowd had gathered in the parking lot. Regular customers stood around with their coffee cups, watching as reporters set up their cameras. Officer Chen was there too, directing traffic around the chaos. You okay to walk in by yourself? Mrs. Rodriguez asked as they pulled up. I can come with you if you want. Sarah squeezed her neighbor's hand. I'll be fine. Thank you for the ride. But as she stepped out of the car, Her legs felt wobbly. The baby was extra active this morning too, as if sensing her nervousness. A reporter noticed her and pointed his camera in her direction, but Officer Chen quickly stepped between them. "No pictures until the official announcement," he said firmly. Then, in a softer voice to Sarah, "Go on in through the side door. Jerry's waiting for you." The side door? They never used the side door. It led directly to Jerry's small office, bypassing the store floor. Sarah's confusion grew as she made her way around the building. Jerry was indeed waiting by the side door, wearing a suit she'd never seen before. "Sarah, thank goodness you're here. They're waiting in my office." "Who's waiting?" "Jerry, please tell me what's going on. I'm getting scared." Jerry's face softened. "Don't be scared. This is good news. Really good news. Just go on in." Sarah put her hand on the door handle, then hesitated. Through the small window, she could see several people in business suits inside Jerry's tiny office. Her heart was pounding so hard, she was sure everyone could hear it. "Jerry," she whispered, "does this have something to do with Michael Jordan's visit last night?" But Jerry just smiled and gestured for her to go in. Sarah took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and opened the door. The baby gave a strong kick, as if saying, "You can do this, Mama." The office was crowded with people in expensive suits, but Sarah barely noticed them. Her eyes went straight to the tall figure standing by Jerry's desk. Michael Jordan himself, looking even more impressive in the morning light than he had at 1 a.m. "Mrs. Thompson," he said warmly, stepping forward to shake her hand. "Thank you for coming in on your day off. I hope we didn't frighten you with all the commotion outside." Sarah found her voice. "Mr. Jordan, I don't understand. What's happening?" He gestured to a chair. Jerry's chair, the only comfortable one in the office. "Please, sit down. We have some things to discuss." Sarah sat, her mind spinning. The other people in suits were watching her with strange smiles, like they knew something she didn't. One woman had a stack of papers in her hands. Another man was holding what looked like a gift bag. "First," Jordan said, leaning against Jerry's desk, "I want to tell you a story about my mother." Sarah blinked in surprise, but Jordan continued. "When I was growing up, my mother worked multiple jobs to support our family. She was like you, always smiling, always professional, no matter how tired she was. She taught me that true strength isn't about how much you can lift or how fast you can run. It's about getting up every day and doing what needs to be done, no matter how hard things get." Sarah felt tears pricking at her eyes. She thought about her own mother, about Marcus's mother, about all the strong women she knew who just kept going, day after day. "Last night," Jordan went on, "when I saw you working that late shift, 8 months pregnant, handling everything with such grace, you reminded me of her, and it made me realize something." He paused, and Sarah found herself holding her breath. "It made me realize that I was looking at this all wrong. You see, I came to Jerry's last night because my company was considering buying the whole chain of stores. But watching you work, seeing how you handled those young men, how you kept your dignity despite everything, I knew I couldn't just make this another business deal." Sarah's heart was racing. Buy the stores? Was she about to lose her job after all? "So I made some calls," Jordan continued, "and I changed the deal. Mrs. Thompson, I'd like you to meet my lawyers. They have some papers for you to look at. But before we get to that," he nodded to the man with the gift bag, who stepped forward and handed it to Sarah. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. Inside was a small silver frame, and in that frame was a photograph of Michael Jordan with his mother, both of them smiling, both looking proud. On the back was an inscription, "To Sarah, thank you for reminding me what real strength looks like." MJ, Sarah looked up, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "I don't know what to say." Jordan smiled that famous smile. "Oh, we're just getting started. Now, about those papers." But before he could continue, there was a commotion outside. The door burst open, and Marcus rushed in, still wearing his interview suit, his face flushed from running. "Sarah, I just heard from Mrs. Rodriguez. Are you okay? What's going on?" He stopped short when he saw who was in the room. "Oh my God, you're... Jordan stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. Thompson, perfect timing. We were just about to change your wife's life. How would you like to stick around and help?" Marcus took Jordan's hand in a daze, looking from him to Sarah and back again. "Change her life? How?" Jordan's smile grew wider. "Well, that depends. How do you feel about promotions, college funds, and new job opportunities? Because I have some ideas I'd like to run by you both." Sarah reached for Marcus's hand, and he quickly moved to stand beside her chair. The baby kicked again, stronger than ever, as if celebrating. The woman with the stack of papers stepped forward, laying them out on Jerry's desk. "Shall we begin?" she asked. Sarah looked up at Marcus, then at Jordan, then at all the smiling faces around her. This was really happening. This wasn't a dream. This was the moment everything was about to change. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's begin." The woman with the papers, who introduced herself as Ms. Carter, Jordan's lead attorney, began spreading documents across Jerry's desk. Sarah held tight to Marcus's hand as they listened to what she was saying, both of them trying to process the incredible news. "First," Ms. Carter explained, "let's talk about your new position, Mrs. Thompson. Once you return from maternity leave, you'll be taking on the role of regional manager for all Jerry's gas stations in the Chicago area." Sarah's mouth fell open. "Regional manager? But I'm just a night shift clerk." "No," Jordan interrupted firmly. "You're a natural leader who handles difficult situations with grace. You treat everyone with respect, from teenage troublemakers to late-night customers. That's exactly the kind of person I want running these stores." Marcus squeezed Sarah's hand. "He's right, baby. You're amazing at what you do. Everyone sees it." "The position comes with full benefits," Ms. Carter continued, "including comprehensive health insurance that will cover all your remaining pregnancy and delivery costs. The salary is $85,000 per year to start, with performance bonuses and annual reviews." Sarah felt dizzy. That was more than 3 times what she made now. She could quit the night shift. They could pay off their bills. They could actually start saving money. "And Mr. Thompson," Jordan turned to Marcus, who straightened up immediately. "I made some calls this morning. The Bulls organization is looking for someone with factory management experience to oversee equipment maintenance at the United Center. The job's yours if you want it. Same salary range as Sarah's position, plus benefits." Marcus swayed slightly, and Sarah tugged him down to sit on the arm of her chair. "But my interview this morning," he stammered. Jordan smiled. "Something tells me you won't need it, unless you really want to keep looking?" "No, sir," Marcus said quickly. "I mean, yes, sir. I mean, thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet," Jordan said, reaching for another document. "We're not done. Mrs. Thompson, could you look at this next paper?" Sarah took the document with trembling hands. At first, the legal language was confusing, but then she saw the words, "Educational Trust Fund." and a number that made her gasp. "This is a college fund for your baby," Jordan explained softly. "Enough to cover 4 years at any university they choose, plus graduate school if they want it. My mother always said education was the key to changing your life. I want to make sure your child has every opportunity." Sarah pressed her free hand to her mouth, tears flowing freely now. The baby kicked, as if saying thank you too. "There's more," Ms. Carter said, pulling out another document. "Mr. Jordan has arranged for a new car to be delivered to your home this afternoon. A safe, reliable SUV with enough room for a car seat and all the baby gear you'll need." Marcus was crying now too. "Mr. Jordan, this is too much. We can't possibly." "Yes, you can," Jordan said firmly. "Because this isn't charity. This is an investment. In your family, in these stores, in this community. All I'm doing is giving you the tools. What you build with them will be up to you." Jerry, who had been quietly watching from the corner, stepped forward. "Sarah's the hardest worker I've ever had," he said proudly. "She'll make an amazing regional manager." "I know she will," Jordan agreed. "That's why I bought these stores in the first place." Sarah looked up in surprise. "You mean you weren't planning to buy them before last night?" Jordan shook his head. "I had looked at the financial reports, but I wasn't seriously considering it. Then I met you, watched you work, saw how you handled everything with such dignity, despite your situation. It reminded me so much of my mother that I knew I had to do something. Not just for you, but for all the other hardworking people in these stores." He picked up the photo frame he had given Sarah. "My mother taught me that success means nothing if you don't use it to lift others up. She would have loved you, Mrs. Thompson. You have her spirit." More tears fell as Sarah looked at the photo. She thought about her own mother, about Marcus's mother, about all the strong women who had come before her, about the child growing inside her, who would now have opportunities she had never dreamed possible. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You already have," Jordan said, "by showing me what real strength looks like, by reminding me why I worked so hard to succeed in the first place, not just to win games or make money, but to be able to make a difference in people's lives." He turned to the assembled group. "Could we have the room for a moment? I'd like to speak to the Thompsons privately." Everyone filed out, leaving just Sarah, Marcus, and Michael Jordan in Jerry's small office. The morning sun streamed through the window, making everything seem bright and new. "I want to tell you both something," Jordan said, sitting down so he was at eye level with them. "What I'm giving you today, the jobs, the car, the college fund, those are just things. What really matters is what you do with them." He looked at Sarah's belly. That baby is going to grow up knowing their parents never gave up, that they kept their dignity and their kindness even when things were hard. That's worth more than any money I could give you. Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes. "We'll make you proud, sir. I promise." "I know you will." Jordan stood up. "Now, there are some reporters outside who'd like to hear your story, but only if you're comfortable sharing it. This can stay private if you prefer." Sarah looked at Marcus, then back at Jordan. "No, I want to share it. People need to know there are still angels in this world, that miracles still happen." Jordan smiled. "My mother used to say the same thing. She also said that sometimes God puts you in the right place at the right time, like a pregnant woman working the night shift, reminding a successful man where he came from and what really matters." He held out his hands and helped Sarah to her feet. Marcus put his arm around her waist, supporting her as they always supported each other. "Ready to face the cameras?" Jordan asked. Sarah smoothed her blue dress and stood tall. "Ready." As they walked toward the door, Sarah felt the baby kick again. But this time, instead of worry about the future, she felt only joy. Her child would grow up knowing that anything was possible. That hard work and kindness mattered. That angels sometimes wore expensive suits and showed up at gas stations in the middle of the night. The door opened and camera flashes went off immediately. But Sarah wasn't nervous anymore. She had her husband beside her baby inside her, and the greatest basketball player of all time standing behind her like a guardian angel. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jordan's voice boomed out to the reporters, "I'd like you to meet Sarah Thompson, the woman who reminded me what true greatness looks like. And this is her husband, Marcus. Today, they're going to show you that the American dream isn't dead. Sometimes it's just waiting for a little help to grow." As the reporters gathered around, Sarah felt Marcus squeeze her hand. She thought about the long night shifts, the worried tears, the prayers for something to change. She thought about a chance encounter that had turned into a miracle, and she knew that no matter what happened next, no matter what challenges came their way, they would face them together, stronger, braver, and blessed beyond measure. Because sometimes angels appeared in gas stations at 1 a.m. Though at PBM, sometimes miracles wore basketball shoes, and sometimes all it took to change a life was someone taking the time to really see you, to recognize the strength you carried inside, even when you thought no one was looking. Sarah smiled at the cameras, one hand on her belly where her baby kicked happily, ready to tell their story to the world, ready to begin their new life. Because this wasn't just a happy ending, it was a beautiful beginning. Now that you've heard this heartwarming story of kindness and hope, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? Drop your city and country in the comments below. Did this story touch your heart? Don't forget to like and share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen, even at gas stations at 1 a.m. Remember, sometimes the biggest acts of kindness come from simply taking the time to really see someone. Just like Michael Jordan did that night, we all have the power to change someone's life. Thank you for being part of this amazing story. See you in the next one.